It is almost September and NHL training camps are only a matter of a few weeks away from getting started. In today's video, we're going to discuss the top 5 teams I feel who were out of the playoffs last year who I think can make it this year. We'll get into all that coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're not that far away from the NHL training camps getting underway. We're not really all that far from the 1920 NHL season getting underway. The offseason, for the most part, is pretty much coming to a close, except for some RFA signings that we're waiting for. We've had a lot of free agent signings, a bunch of trades. Teams look different. And I want to talk today about some teams that I think missed the playoffs last year, but I think have an excellent shot at getting back in for the coming season. Now, as we know, every year 16 teams qualify for the playoffs, and at least for right now, 15 teams end up missing out. Of course, once Seattle joins the NHL, it'll be an even split, 16 teams in, 16 teams out. In recent years, we have seen a fair bit of turnover from year to year as well, with teams making it one year, not making it the next, etc. It's a very competitive league. Parity's at an all-time high, and being a consistent playoff contender is no easy task in today's NHL. Now let's jump into the top 5 teams I feel missed last year's playoffs but have a great chance at getting in this year. First up, we got the Arizona Coyotes. Now the Coyotes were a team who really had a strong second half last year. Goaltending was certainly an issue early on with the health of Antti Raanta coming into question yet again, but of course Darcy Kuemper took over and was really a rock for them back there on the Coyotes back end. Now of course they were missing some scoring though. They had a lot of injuries last year as well, and I think they've made some additions this offseason that are going to be huge for them moving forward, and a big key here for the Coyotes is going to be the team health. If they lose a lot of man games due to injuries here yet again, that could derail them, and this prediction may not actually end up taking place. But they made one of the bigger trades of the offseason, acquiring star forward Phil Kessel from the Pittsburgh Penguins. They also brought in Carl Soderberg as well from the Avalanche, so a couple of veteran forwards. Of course, Kessel's going to put up a lot of points. He very well could play on a line with a young dynamic player like Clayton Keller. That might help Keller boost his point totals, keep Kessel producing at a strong rate as well. It might be the scoring punch that they were missing in the past. They should also get a nice offensive punch from youngster Barrett Hayton, who more likely makes the team. And if they can keep other guys like Nick Schmaltz and Jacob Chychrun and Antti Raanta healthy, along with the strong play of Darcy Kuemper continuing, they very well might have one of the better goaltending tandems around the NHL. And goaltending certainly takes you a really long way. I don't see there being a ton of turnover in the Western Conference, but I do think the Coyotes are one of the teams that have the best shot of getting in and knocking out one of last year's playoff teams out of the mix. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils. Now, I think it's fair to say that the Devils certainly had one of the best off seasons around the NHL. Ray Shero has been very aggressive and made a lot of great acquisitions. Certainly having the #1 overall selection of the 2019 NHL draft helped quite a bit as well. Of course, he put that pick to great use by selecting Jack Hughes, and while at that NHL draft, made a huge splash by making a big trade with the Predators, acquiring defenseman PK Subban. Now, of course, later on into the offseason, he also swung a deal with the Vegas Golden Knights to acquire a Russian forward Nikita Gusev, who will be making his NHL debut after coming over from the KHL. Now, that certainly could be a little bit of a risky move, but at the same time, it's a 2-year contract that they signed him to. They didn't give up a whole lot to acquire him, and really, even if he doesn't turn out to be quite as offensive as he might, it's still overall fairly low risk, but I will admit there are some risk involved. But like I said, Gusev has a lot of potential. He's one of the most dynamic players that come out of the KHL, really since Artemi Panarin. So we'll see if that game can translate to North American ice and into the NHL, and if he can have a positive impact. And of course, they also brought in a veteran forward with Wayne Simmons on a 1-year prove-it-to-me kind of contract. Of course, Simmons is looking to bounce back and get back to his scoring ways as well, and having that kind of short-term contract is going to motivate him even more to push his production numbers up to get himself a more lucrative contract at this time next year. Now, the big question mark for me with the Devils is certainly in goal. I mean, Corey Schneider is really hard to say how he's going to do, but Mackenzie Blackwood certainly emerged last year as a great option for them. Of course, Keith Kincaid's no longer in the picture, so the tandem likely is going to be Schneider and Blackwood. But can Mackenzie Blackwood continue where he left off last year and take it up to an even another level here? Because if he can, and he can provide that back-end stability, then that very well might be enough, along with all the other additions that we just discussed, to get them over the hump and get back into the playoffs. Now, personally, I see a fair bit of potential turnover in the Eastern Conference this year. A lot of the teams that made it last year, some teams really got better, some didn't. There's a lot of possibilities here, I think, of teams switching themselves in and out of the playoffs here. So I think the Devils are a team that could overtake some of their division rivals and get themselves into the mix. We very well might have another time here where we see 5 Metro Division teams get into the playoffs, but it really boils down to how things go in the Atlantic. It's not going to be easy. We very well might have more of an even split this year, but either way, no matter what happens, I do think the Devils stand a great chance of overtaking some of the other teams that were ahead of them last year and getting back to the playoffs. Next up, we have another team from the Metropolitan Division, and that's the New York Rangers, who also had themselves a terrific offseason. Of course, behind New Jersey, picking at number 2, got themselves quite a star forward with Kakko. I see him having a terrific rookie season and a great career in the NHL. He's probably the most NHL-ready player that come out of the draft. Of course, they also won free agency by signing big-time winger Artemi Panarin. They also acquired Jacob Trouba. They got Adam Fox as well. They're likely going to have a newcomer coming over from Russia who they drafted last year, Vitaly Kravtsov. This team is really going to be adding a ton of offensive power, plus some great help on the blue line. So I think this Rangers rebuild is going to be really accelerated quite a bit this year. If Henrik Lundqvist can provide that stability in net that he's done for the most of his career here, then I think this Rangers team very well can battle for a playoff spot and will certainly be taking a lot more seriously than they have been over the past couple years. They've really done a terrific job with this rebuild. They got a lot of great young talent, and I think that they have what it takes to take over the hump here and get back into the playoff picture. Now jumping over to the Atlantic Division, and one of the teams I think we're going to have to watch very closely is the Florida Panthers. I've been saying it for a few years now that they were going to get themselves back into the playoffs and be a serious playoff contender, but they keep year after year having something happen to derail things. They've certainly made some major moves this offseason, and hopefully we'll be putting all that to an end and getting back in for this year. They've added goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky to a mega contract. Hopefully he can live up to and earn that. He's certainly had a great career so far and should bring that much needed stability to that back end for the Panthers. Of course, the last few years with Luongo and Reimer, that there's many times that the team scored lots of goals, but just didn't get the timely saves and just really couldn't keep that position solidified enough to get them over the hump and get into the playoffs. Luongo in the last couple of years just hasn't been quite himself and hasn't been able to play up to his old standards. Reimer, unfortunately, had problems staying healthy as well, and when he was in the net was inconsistent. So hopefully Bobrovsky will bring that much needed stability to really lock things down there. They also added some great depth scoring in guys like Brett Connolly, Nola Cherry. They added Anton Strawman on the back end. They already had a very deep forward group up front. I really think this Florida Panther team is going to be greatly improved. They also got a big-time head coach in Joel Quenneville who's going to be guiding them into the right direction here. So I really believe that this Panthers team is finally going to take a leap forward and become a playoff team of the 1920 season. Now, staying in the Atlantic Division, the 5th team I think who's going to get back into the playoffs this year is the Montreal Canadiens. Now, of course, out of all the teams that missed last year, the Habs were the closest. It was down between them and the Columbus Blue Jackets, and unfortunately, the Blue Jackets, with all that extra added star power down the stretch, got over the hump and beat them out here for that final playoff spot. But Montreal made a lot of leaps and bounds last year, and I think things are going to continue for the coming year. Having a healthy Shea Weber for a full season will certainly make a huge difference. Having some young players like Jesperi Kotkaniemi, as well as a guy like Ryan Poehling jump into their lineup and have a big impact, take some big steps forward, is also going to go a long ways as well. Hopefully a player like Max Domi, who had a major breakthrough season last year, can continue that progress forward. I mean, you would think with all the numbers he put up last year that he might be a candidate to regress a little bit, but if he can keep up that strong play, that's going to be huge for Montreal. Hopefully they don't see regression out of Domi. Certainly be nice to get some better production and more consistent production from Jonathan Drouin. But overall, Montreal didn't make a lot of big moves throughout the offseason. The Montreal Canadiens also added goaltender Keith Kincaid as well to back up Carey Price. So hopefully Price and Kincaid can provide that stability in the net. Carey Price certainly had a much more solid year last year and certainly was a big part of the reason why we saw the Montreal Canadiens bounce back and have a much better season than the year before. But overall, the Montreal Canadiens were doing a lot of things right last year. They only need a little bit more of a push, and they can get themselves back into the playoffs, and hopefully their young players can take that step forward. A healthy Shea Weber, a continuing play, strong play from Carey Price will will them in to the Stanley Cup Playoffs in the 1920 season. So, of course, with all these teams maybe getting back into the playoffs, who will miss the playoffs instead? Well, certainly stay tuned. We'll be putting out another video here over the next couple of days telling you which teams I think these teams are going to end up replacing and which teams who made the playoffs last year I think will likely miss for the coming season. Of course, as always, I want to know your NHL predictions as well. Which NHL teams who missed the playoffs last year do you think are most likely to have the best shot at getting back in for the 1920 season? Leave your comments down below and we'll continue the conversation in the comments section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.